a forgotten umbrella, and a trail of secrets. Welcome to Rust Evidence. I am your host, Silas Wren. I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Your comments always make this journey unforgettable. Let's begin. It was a drizzling evening, the sort that blurred the lamps along Boulevard Richard Lenoir into hazy circles of yellow. Maigret had left the office early, though he could not say exactly why. There was no pressing case, no summons. He simply felt the weight of the air heavy with damp and decided to walk rather than ride home. His pipe was unlit in his pocket, though he reached for it every so often, fingers testing the curved stem as if reassurance were necessary. Madame Maigret would be waiting with a small supper. Perhaps veal with carrots, or the soup she had left to simmer since midday. He pictured her knitting in the front room, spectacles low on her nose, looking up at the sound of his key in the lock. He liked that thought, though he did not hurry his steps. Rain always slowed him. It pressed down on Paris, softened voices, made the city seem weary in a way he understood. He stopped once beneath an awning outside a tobacconist's, watching people hurry past, clerks clutching their briefcases, a woman tugging at a child's sleeve, an old man cursing the weather. It was all so ordinary, yet Maigret found himself observing with unusual patience. He had that sensation, which he did not name even to himself, that the evening carried some slight disturbance. Not a storm, not a catastrophe, just a thread out of place. At the corner of Rue Oberkampf he heard laughter behind him. 3 young men in overcoats passed briskly, one holding a bottle wrapped in paper. Their voices were light, careless, yet it reminded him of nights long past when mischief led to trouble. He followed with his eyes until they turned out of sight. Then he lit his pipe at last, cupping the match against the drizzle. It was near Place de la République when he noticed the police car standing awkwardly by the curb. Its lights were off, but 2 uniformed men lingered near the doorway of a narrow building. They were not rushing, not excited, just watchful. One of them recognized him, stiffened slightly and gave a small nod. Maigret hesitated. He was off duty technically, and he could as easily pass by. Yet he paused, removed the pipe from his mouth and approached at his unhurried pace. "Evening, Chief," said the younger constable. His cap was pushed too far back. Nervousness showed in the way he kept adjusting it. "What is it?" Maigret asked, not brusquely, but as if inquiring about the weather. "Nothing much, sir." "A small business. We were called about a disturbance upstairs. Someone found a body." Maigret's brows lifted, though only slightly. "What sort of body?" The young man glanced at his colleague. "Her lodger, male, middle-aged. They say it looks natural enough, but—" Maigret prompted softly. "Well, it's odd." There was an umbrella left beside him. "Open, though it hasn't rained inside." The older constable gave a grunt as if embarrassed by the detail. Maigret did not smile. He only looked up at the darkened windows above, listening to the faint sound of dripping gutters. "Show me," he said, though it was neither an order nor a request, more like the inevitable next step in a walk he had already chosen. And as he climbed the narrow stairwell, pipe unlit again, Maigret felt the tug of that earlier unease, the thread out of place, now waiting in some dim room above, in the company of a body and an umbrella that should not have been open. The stairwell smelled of old soap and boiled cabbage, the sort of smell that lingered in the wallpaper, even when no one was cooking. The younger constable went first, stepping carefully to avoid announcing himself to the whole house, though the timbers creaked regardless. On the second landing a door opened a crack, and a woman's eye appeared, then vanished. Maigret did not look up. He was watching the way the damp had puckered the paint along the handrail. He felt the weight of the evening settle a little deeper in his shoulders. The door in question stood ajar on the 3rd floor, its paint rubbed smooth around the knob. Inside, the room made no effort to look exceptional. A small iron bed with a brown cover spread tight, a table with a checked oilcloth, a wash basin showing a ring of chalky residue, a single wardrobe with one door that did not fully close. The window had been opened a finger's width, letting in a ribbon of street noise and the smell of wet stone. The floorboards drank the thin light and gave nothing back. He saw the man first as a shape more than a person, seated awkwardly in a chair beside the table, head tipped to the side as if listening. Middle-aged, thinning hair brushed straight back, a grey suit that might have been respectable. On the first day it was worn, but had since learned resignation. The tie was knotted too tightly for comfort, and one cuff showed a line where the starch had given up. His hands resting on his thighs were open. "Name?" Maigret asked quietly. "Larcher Armand," the older constable said. He had the voice of a man who saved syllables where he could. "Clerk at a wine importer, Rue du Temple. Concierge called us, said the door was latched but not locked. She came up to complain about the wireless. Someone kept turning the knob and getting only static. She didn't like the sound. Doctor?" Maigret said. "Had a look," the constable replied, gesturing toward the building's rear. "From across the way, Dr. Renier. Heart, he thinks. Or a stroke. There's no mark. There was no mark." The face had fallen into that flaccid arrangement the dead adopt, and yet it did not seem surprised. Maigret had seen the surprised ones. This one had the expression of a man who had run out of postponements. Between the chair and the table, an umbrella stood open on its ribs, glossy black canopy beaded with a rash of tiny droplets that caught what little light there was. It occupied too much of the small room, like an unspeaking guest who had chosen the wrong moment to visit. The tip had scratched a pale crescent in the floorboards, where someone had set it down and adjusted it. "Open?" Maigret said, though he did not inflect the question. "Yes," the younger man answered quickly. "We found it like that." He moved closer without haste. The umbrella was the carefully made kind that avoided drawing attention to itself. Wooden handle rubbed smooth by years of palms, brass ferrule dulled to a modest gleam. One rib had been repaired near the edge with a few stitches, not black but a dark blue cotton that had faded. It was the sort of repair that would have been done in a kitchen on a weekday evening, with a needle chosen from a tomato-shaped pincushion. He set 2 fingers against the fabric. It was damp to the touch. He took them away and let them dry by themselves. Near the door stood another umbrella, the sort that a man bought once and never thought of again, frayed at the tips, the runner stiff, the handle scuffed. It was folded, leaned against the wall beside a flat cap with sweat darkening the band. That one, Maigret could have believed belonged to Larcher. The open one less so. He looked at the shoes. They were polished, but the polish had not been refreshed today. The soles, when the constable lifted a foot gently at Maigret's nod, were not clean. They wore the city in a thin film. But they were not wet either. On a day like this, the streets left their mark. Dark edges, grit at the seams. The laces had been tied with the care of habit. He bent, not to inspect, but to be at the level of the room's breadth. On the oilcloth stood a cup and saucer. The cup held the last finger of coffee, cooled into its own smell. No lipstick on the rim. Beside it, a sugar wrapped in paper sat untouched, though the wrapper had been opened halfway, as if the thought had been there and left. In the ashtray, 3 cigarette ends, all the same brand by the faint blue line near the filter. The last had been crushed carefully, not with irritation. He could have identified the man by that, if not by the papers in his pocket. Armand Larcher, who finished things, even cigarettes. "You called the concierge?" Maigret asked. "She's downstairs," the older man said. "Didn't want to come in again. Superstitious, I suppose. Says the umbrella, well, says it's a bad sign." It was a bad sign, but not the sort she meant. Maigret glanced at the crack of window. The sill showed no drops inside. The rain had been too fine to invade. On the back of the chair hung a jacket, Larcher's from the look of the pockets gone shapeless with keys and small coins. There was a hat on the peg by the door, the cheap felt kind with a crease that refused to stay straight. The wardrobe yielded shirts folded with a deliberate thrift, a spare suit that had seen better elbows, and a tie rolled around a cardboard tube. In the top drawer, a little tin of pastilles, a packet of bills tied with string, a photograph of a woman cut from a larger print. Mid-40s, hair set in waves, a mouth that smiled without being happy. No inscription. He put the photograph back and closed the drawer without sound. The constables shuffled as if the room were too small for 4 men, which it was. On the landing, the boards creaked again and the door opened to admit Lognon, whose coat was already wet in a way that suggested the rain had chosen him personally. His expression, when he saw Maigret, was the same resigned lament you might give to a bus that arrived full. "They sent me for a natural death?" he said, taking in the scene, his eyes already measuring forms and forms to be filled. "You're just in time to be annoyed," Maigret said mildly. Lognon stared at the open umbrella. "People dry them like that," he muttered. "Do they?" Maigret said, as if the question were about the habits of birds. "Concierge," Lognon added almost to himself. They notice everything except what they should. As if summoned, the concierge appeared at the threshold, twisting her hands in her apron. She was a thin woman with a face that had dried into lines the way apples shrivel in winter. "Monsieur le commissaire," she said, not quite sure whether the title was correct but eager to show deference. "I didn't want to come in again. I'm not well, I don't like it. You knew Monsieur Larcher?" Maigret asked with the toneless gentleness he used for frightened people. "Since he came." 3 years, quiet, always the rent on time. He leaves early, returns late. No trouble. He doesn't bring ladies." She paused, then added with a sort of defiance, "He is not that kind." "His umbrella?" Maigret tilted his head toward the folded one by the door. "That's his, yes. Always that one. He shakes it on the mat." She looked at the open umbrella and pinched her mouth. "That one I never saw." "Who visits him?" Maigret said. She considered. "On Thursdays, sometimes a gentleman with spectacles. They speak low. And once a month a woman, no, not a lady, a working woman. Coat too thin for the season. They don't stay long. He is polite. He stands to open the door. What time did he return this evening?" "I didn't hear," she said, uncertain now that she was being precise. "But at 6 I went to the cellar for coal and his shoes were outside the door. He leaves them for the boy to polish. At 1:30, the wireless made that noise, like bees in a bottle. I went up to complain. The door was on the latch. I pushed it with my foot and—" She stopped and looked at the umbrella as if it had addressed her rudely. "I don't like it when they are open inside." "Nor do I," Maigret said, and he meant it. He asked for the wireless. It sat on a shelf, its cloth front stained, the dial glowing weakly when the younger constable turned the knob. Between stations the fuzz rose and fell like breath. On the table a match lay apart from its box, sulphur head blackened without having lit anything. He felt in his pocket for his own matches and did not take them out. "It rained all afternoon," Lognon said, as if arguing with the room. "If someone brought that thing in wet and opened it, it means he had just arrived. But his shoes—" He broke off, irritated to find himself thinking along someone else's line. Maigret said. He pictured, without forcing the image, the ordinary progression of Larcher's evening: a step, a key in the lock, a hat on the peg, the jacket over the chair, the kettle filled and the coffee measured, a cigarette after the first sip. The umbrella, someone else's, intruded on that pattern. The blue stitches done quickly, maybe in a kitchen like this one, but not this one. The dryness where wet should have been. The sugar packet half peeled, because perhaps a voice had spoken from the doorway, or because the wireless had sputtered a familiar sound. He looked again at the man's hands open on his thighs. "Have someone note the neighbors," he said softly. "We'll speak to them when they've had time to be annoyed about it," Lognon grunted. The concierge, relieved to be given something to do, began listing doors and names with too much eagerness. The rain ticked on the window in a patient way. Maigret stood with his hands in his coat pockets, the pipe heavy and unlit, and felt the small wrongness of the umbrella settle inside him like a pebble in a shoe, not painful yet, but impossible to ignore on a long walk. On the landing, the air was cooler, smelling of damp wood and faintly, of onions that had been fried earlier in some other life. Maigret stood a moment with his head turned, as if listening for a particular note. The murmur of the street crept up the stairwell. Someone coughed behind a door and then held their breath, the way people do when they think sound carries guilt. He knocked at the first door, knuckles gentle. After a pause, a woman with needles stuck like porcupine quills into her cuff opened just enough to show her face. She had the exhausted patience of a seamstress, and a black thread twisted around her finger, where it had cut into the skin. "Madame," Maigret said, not asking anything yet. She looked past him toward the open room and shivered even though there was no draught. "Is it Monsieur Larcher?" She knew already. The house had told her in the little ways houses do. Yes. He was quiet, she said, as if that was something one could put on a certificate. He took his shoes off on the mat, so the boy wouldn't have to scrub the hall. He boiled an egg on Sundays. Once he asked if I could mend the lining in his jacket. He paid what I asked without turning the coin over twice. Did you hear anyone with him this evening? Her eyes went toward the ceiling, as if the answer had been written there and was smudged. No voices. The wireless, only the buzzing. It makes me nervous, that sound. At 6, I pricked my thumb and went to fetch the iodine. After that, I don't know the hour. Do you mend umbrellas? Maigret asked. resting the question against her like a hand on a shoulder, not a weight. She allowed herself a small sniff that was almost pride. When I mend, I match the thread. People notice. That blue, she said, tilting her chin toward nothing in particular. That's from someone's kitchen drawer. It will hold, but it tells on the household. Whose household? She widened the door another inch, and the smell of warm iron came out. Half the women here have drawers like that. On the second floor, Madame Villon buys thread by whatever is cheapest. In the attic, Mademoiselle Berthe uses her aunt's cast-offs and says it's the same. Me, I keep proper stock. She hesitated. The blue looks like what mothers use for boys' sailor suits. Not new, not washed since last year. Merci, he said. And she accepted the thanks as payment enough and closed the door without sound. 2 doors down, a man in shirt sleeves with a watchmaker's loop still in his eye opened before the knock had finished. The loop magnified his iris so it floated there, huge and watchful, and when he removed it the smallness of his real eye seemed like a trick. Durupt, he supplied, because men who repair small things like to be efficient. I heard you come in. The concierge runs like a cat when she's frightened. You know Larcher. Only by his watch, Durupt said, shrugging in such a way that his bony shoulders clicked. Good movement, serviced every November. He is not untidy with his time. He peered past Maigret into the room and then away again, as if refusing a suite he did not trust. Is he? Well, yes. Did you hear him receive a visitor? At 5 I closed the shop. At 5:30, a customer came to collect a mantel clock and complained of the rain as if I had arranged it. At 6 I boiled potatoes. At 6:15 I heard the stairs complain. Light steps like someone who has taught herself not to be heard. Women's shoes do that more than men's, but I am not a poet. It could have been the boy. Which boy? The errand boy for the grocer. He delivers to the 2nd floor on Tuesdays and wanders into the wrong doors. He hesitated, then added with a kind of apology, I smell things. At 6:20, cabbage with lard from the front apartment, starch from Mademoiselle Berthe's iron, and a whiff of lavender that was not the concierge's soap. Lavender, Maigret repeated without making it a conclusion. Imitation, Durupt said, almost offended on behalf of true lavender. The cheap kind. You receive a man with spectacles on Thursdays? Maigret asked, and Durupt blinked as if he had been pricked somewhere delicate. Me? I sell a pair now and then. If you mean the gentleman who visits Larcher, I have seen him pass. He keeps to the rail and does not look about. He has the look of someone who spends his days adding numbers that don't belong to him. That is a look? You would be surprised how many looks there are, Durupt said, and closed his door as neatly as he wound a spring. On the attic floor, Mademoiselle Berthe opened with her iron still in hand, hair in pin curls and a brave mouth painted carefully to compensate for disappointments. She talked at once because silence frightened her. I said to my aunt, that buzzing will be the death of me, and look. I don't mean it like that. It's just something you say, no. He was a decent man. He didn't stare. The one with the spectacles, he stares. He stares like he's counting hairs. What time did you hear the buzzing? Always at the wrong time. I iron when the light is still good, and the buzzing says there is weather between me and the music. At 6:30 it was worse. Then it stopped and I thought, he found a station. Then the concierge knocked and I burned my collar. Did you see anyone with an umbrella? She brightened at the concretely useless thing she could offer. I saw an umbrella on the stairs at 5:50. Closed. The ferrule had a little dent like a bitten nail. Black cloth. But umbrellas are like hats. You only notice when it rains. He thanked her and let the door be the thing that ended her speech. By the time he reached the 2nd floor, the rain had grown steadier, making a thin thread of sound along the facing wall. Madame Villon opened before he knocked, because there are women who prefer to meet trouble halfway if they can choose their expression for it. She wore a cardigan with pills at the elbows and had a child thin as a sparrow perched on her hip. I have soup on, she said, as if that were a protection. It will not curdle for me, Maigret answered. At 6, did the grocer's boy come? She hitched the child higher. He came at 5:40 with potatoes. At 6, my husband came and shook his umbrella where I told him not to, and left footprints, and I said, one day you'll catch your death and I'll have to sell your boots to pay for the doctor. That was my 6. And after? After. The soup. After that, nothing until the concierge ran. He looked at the child, who looked back with grave, sticky eyes. The child said, in the clear voice of someone for whom facts weigh nothing, "Auntie came yesterday with a purple scarf and Mamma hid the sugar." "Hush," Madame Villon said, and the child obeyed the way children do when they are used to being listened to, not when they are used to being struck. In the loge, the concierge had found paper and was copying names in a crabbed hand as if writing could put corners around fear. A black cat made itself flat near the coal scuttle, pretending not to exist and succeeding. Maigret asked for the post. She produced the bundle that had come at noon and the few pieces for Larcher that she had placed in his pigeonhole. A bill from the gas company, a circular from a men's clothier, where the suits always looked better than the men who wore them, and a small envelope addressed in a precise slanted hand. No return address. The flap had been opened neatly and resealed with saliva that had not bothered with discretion. He turned it over, then returned it to the stack without opening it again. "Not yet. Who has a lavender smell?" he asked the concierge, as if it were ordinary to inquire after a scent the way one might inquire after a tenant's rent. She considered with the seriousness of a woman counting rosary beads. "Mademoiselle Berthe uses a toilet water that comes in a green bottle, but that is not lavender, no matter what it says. Madame Villon had sachets once when her sister came to stay, but now it's gone stale. On the first floor, the piano teacher smells of chalk and nothing else. The one with the spectacles smells of ink. And Larcher? Of coffee," she said, surprising herself with the tenderness of it, and looked quickly at her list. Back upstairs, Lognon had found an attitude that made the open umbrella look like it had been set there to mock him personally. "You want me to take it?" he asked, unhappy at the idea that he might become responsible for an object with opinions. "Leave it until it decides to be less sure of itself," Maigret said. He leaned down once more, closer than before, and drew a breath from within the canopy's little cave. There was rain there because the world contained rain. Under it, a faint ghost of something floral that had not sprung from Larcher's cupboard, and less the scent than the idea of one. Soap from a basin that had been used by someone impatient. He straightened and looked at the sugar paper on the table with its careful hesitation, at the match laid aside like a thought interrupted, at the chair that had accepted a man and then surrendered him. He did not have a story yet, only the shape of where a story would stand when it arrived. He put his hands into his pockets and let the room breathe around him. The evening was in no hurry. Neither was he. Somewhere between 6 and 7, someone had stepped across the threshold with a small weather of their own and left it open on the floor. He would find them not by racing down the street, but by sitting still long, enough for their silence to speak. Lognon grumbled to the doctor and to the gendarmes in a manner that satisfied no one, and therefore reassured everyone. The body would go in an hour. The room would be sealed in the practical way that still allowed the concierge to dust around her fear. Maigret told them to leave the umbrella where it stood, as if it had chosen its own place. He slipped the small, precise envelope into his pocket without announcing it to the room. There were things a man thought about better when they were near his heart than on a table under other men's eyes. The rain had decided itself by the time he came down. It came straight now with fewer doubts. In the loge, the cat had found a new shape, coiled as a question mark. The concierge looked up only to see if he would ask anything more of her, and, relieved when he didn't, went back to copying names in her crabbed hand. Outside, a boy was testing the depth of the gutter with the toe of his shoe, and the water took his leaf boat in the single-direction water nose. Maigret set his hat low, turned up his collar, and walked toward home at the same unhurried pace with which he had gone toward the house. Madame Maigret had kept the soup warm without overthinking it. He hung his coat, put his hat where it lived, and washed his hands longer than was necessary, not to remove anything, but because the cool water steadied the day into its proper order. They ate without ceremony. She watched him the way she watched dough rise, to know when to take it from the oven. He told her because he always did. Enough to make the room they were in the right size. A lodger, he said. No marks. Something that looked foolish at first and then not foolish. What looked foolish? She asked, cutting bread with small firm strokes. An umbrella open in a room. She made a face that was almost a smile. Guests do that. People who do not live with the floorboards. They think air dries things and forget that wood remembers. He had lived with those boards, Maigret said, hearing the sense of the remark as if it were the sound of a key turned properly. And a woman, she said, not pressing it. A woman leaves umbrellas like that. They have hands for other things, parcels, a handbag that won't close, a thought that needs both palms. Lavender, he said. Not your sort, she said, wrinkling her nose. The sort you buy because the shape of the bottle looks like the real thing. He took the letter from his pocket when she had gone to rinse the bowls and held it near the lamp. The paper had a faint watermark that required patience to notice. In the angle of the flap, there was a crease too neat to be accidental. The glue had been softened and pressed again by someone who did not make a habit of opening other people's post. He tilted it to catch the light. People who write in slanted hands often press harder on their downstrokes. The pressure leaves ghosts. If he squinted and let his eyes relax, he could see indentations on the back. Not words, but the shape of words. A long one in the middle, the rhythm of 6 or 7 letters, and under it a number, no, 2 numbers separated by a dot or a dash. He put the envelope back, because guessing before coffee in the morning was a way of confusing one's own scent with someone else's. After supper, he smoked without lighting his pipe, as he sometimes did when his hands wanted occupation more than his lungs wanted smoke. She knitted. The sound of the needles made a soft arithmetic. On the street, the rain talked to the drains in a language that had fewer verbs than nouns. It was not late when they went to bed. In the dark he could see, as one sometimes does, not a scene but its arrangement. The chair pulled a little away from the table. The match laid aside like a thought interrupted. The umbrella making its round black statement in a poor room. In the morning the world had washed itself and left streaks. He went first to the Quai des Orfèvres, to put the facts where facts belonged, and then to Rue du Temple, where wine came and went under chalk marks and men added and subtracted numbers that had as much to do with weather as with grapes. The importer's office had the smell of cork and damp carton. A head clerk with a stiff collar that did not fit his neck presented himself with a name shorter than his moustache. "We are very sorry about Monsieur Larcher," the man said in the grave. Impersonal way people are sorry about a colleague who did not spoil their lunch and is now gone. "What do you know about him?" Maigret asked. "He arrived at 9 and left at 5 like a clock you can set your breakfast by. He ate his sandwich on the premises to save time for others. Once a month he drew a small advance and repaid it in 3 parts as if he did not trust his own good fortune. He did not talk politics. He kept a spare pencil in his vest. Yesterday? Yesterday he left at 5:15. The man said after consulting a little book that gave the appearance of being consulted for everything even when it was not. Madame from the telephones was late, which annoyed him but only by the movement of his jaw. He signed for a parcel and locked it in his drawer. "There is no parcel now. We looked because you would look." "Visitors?" Maigret said. The head clerk considered the word as if it might hold a stain. "A gentleman from accounting on Thursdays brings the quarterly to be verified, because we do not trust the post with certain things. He has spectacles that slide down his nose and fingers that stay clean around ink. He does not shake hands. I cannot recommend him." "A woman!" The man's collar fought him when he swallowed. "Occasionally, perhaps. We are not a place for romance, monsieur. There is a girl from the bottling who has a cousin in a hat shop near the Bastille and wears scents that argue with the wine. But Monsieur Larcher looked past her as if she were a calendar for the wrong year. He led Maigret to a narrow cage of a desk that had been Larcher's. In the top drawer, the shade of an envelope, where an envelope had lain long enough to teach the wood its outline. In the second, the ledger with figures that made their own timid sense. At the back, under the ledger, a paper knife with a smooth bone handle nicked at the tip. Someone careless had prized up a nail with it. He weighed it and put it down. On the blotter, a small clean patch where a cup had stood and been wiped up immediately. The way timid men fear stains they can't account for later. "What was the parcel?" he asked. The clerk's moustache disapproved of not knowing. "From a paper merchant on Rue du Faubourg du Temple. We use them for envelopes. I signed last week for the same." The stock was low. He gestured toward a cupboard. The shelf was orderly in the way of men who cannot afford disorder. One packet lay open. The envelopes inside were the same quality as the one in Maigret's pocket, with the same faint watermark that required patience to notice. Back on the street, the rain made up its mind again and began softly. He turned into a cafe, whose windows held the grey morning like water holds a reflection. He ordered coffee and did not drink it until it had a skin. From his pocket he took the precise envelope. In the quiet corner, he slid a thumbnail under the flap where the glue had already given way, and opened it without hurry. Inside, 4 lines in a slanted hand that pushed harder at the end of words than at the beginning. No address, simply the name, as if names were rooms one could walk into without knocking. Monsieur Larcher at 6, if you please. It will not take long. Do not be cross. I will bring what I can. If you would rather, I can return Thursday with the rest. No signature. No threats. A modest urgency only. He read it twice and then once more, looking not for meaning but for the smell of it. The words belonged to someone who apologized for existing and demanded something in the same sentence. He put the note back in its envelope and the envelope back where his pipe usually lived. A woman could write like that, and many do. A certain kind of man, too, especially one who had spent a long time waiting outside doors. The blue stitches on an umbrella rib suggested hands that made do. The lavender that wasn't insisted on being noticed, and then tried to pass as nothing at all. At 6, Durupt had heard light steps. At 6:15, the stairs had complained. Somewhere between those small weights and the larger weight of a man tipping to one side in his chair, money had changed hands or not changed hands, which is sometimes the same thing. He finished his coffee, which had gone cold the way coffee always does when one is listening to it. On the way out, he bought matches he did not need from the woman behind the counter, because it seemed the sort of kindness Larcher might have paid forward when he had a coin that would not be missed. In the rain, he lit his pipe, let it go out, and walked toward Rue Oberkampf for no better reason than that the blue thread and the apology in the letter both felt like things that belonged to streets where people lived close, enough to hear one another breathe. Oberkampf took the rain better than some streets. It let it fall where it would and did not pretend to be surprised. Grocers put boxes under the awnings, and the fishmonger wiped his marble not because it needed it, but because he would have done so on a dry day too. Maigret went into the little shop with the red-painted door where potatoes were stacked to suggest abundance. The bell made a sound that belonged to bells. Madame behind the counter had her sleeves rolled, and the look of a woman who can remember 10 accounts at once and still tell a boy to wipe his feet. She recognized him without the flourish people sometimes give to recognition, and nodded as if to say, "You will want the truth, and I have it salted properly." "Your boy," he said. "On Tuesdays he delivers upstairs, 2nd floor. Jules," she said with equal economy. "At 5:30, sometimes a little after if the rain makes him think of boats." "Yesterday?" she called, and a thin child with the quickness of a dog who expects to be sent twice came from the back with twine around his wrist. His hair was still damp in clumps and he smelled faintly of onions, as most useful boys do. "2nd floor, Madame Villon," Jules recited, "because good errands make good memory. A kilo of potatoes, half a cabbage, a bit of pork skin for the soup." She gave me 2 sous and told me to put the bag behind the stove. At the stairs, a lady told me to mind my feet, and I did. "A lady?" Maigret said. He did not look at the woman behind the counter, and she did not look at him. Jules nodded, pleased at being able to offer something exact. With a scarf like a grape. She had a nice umbrella with wood and a little brass nose. It had sewing by the edge like my Aunt Leah does when the dog eats the hem. Blue sewing. Not the same blue all the way. "What time?" Jules looked at the clock as if it could tell him what he had known before. "After I put the bag, so near to 6. The lady went up slow. She held her skirt because the water makes it dirty. "Did she speak to you?" "She said, 'You'll bring the sugar Thursday,' and I said I don't carry sugar without Madame's say. Then she laughed a little and said, 'It's only a spoon.' But Madame don't let me carry spoons either." Madame made a sound that could have been a cough. "Sugar is dear," she said, and her mouth made the small shape women's mouths make when they do accounts they do not put on paper. "Thursday my supplier brings the course. People come to ask before they come to pay." "Lavender," Maigret said softly, not as a question. Madame let down her sleeves to her wrists as if to keep judgment off her forearms. "The sort that sits on the skin and refuses to sink," she said. "There is a girl at the laundry who buys it by the little bottle when she has coins. She wears a scarf that is too much for her coat. Name?" he said, almost an afterthought. "She is called Aline in some mouths and Lily in others. She lives in Passage des Trois Sœurs, behind the yard where they keep the delivery carts. If you go, do not tell her I sent you. Tell her the rain told you. She will believe that more. He thanked them and bought an apple he did not want. Outside, he ate it slowly, because the act of eating a fruit keeps men from arriving too quickly where they think they are going. Passage des Trois Sœurs did not improve itself in the rain. Laundry steam made its own weather under the arch. Women's arms flashed pale between sheets, and the tapping of irons kept a busy silence. A woman with a purple scarf, not new, came out with a parcel wrapped in newspaper against her chest. She would have been pretty if cosmetics could teach the bone a new arrangement. The scarf drew the eye and regretted it. Lily, he said, and her chin tipped up before her eyes did. People who have borrowed from the world expect to be called by their smaller names. I am late, she answered, already defensive. If it is for Madame Levesque's account, I will put 2 sous tomorrow, tell her. Thursday I will put more. There is the festival of Saint. She stopped because he was not the sort to approve saints enlisted in small economies. It is not the account, he said. It is a man on the 3rd floor of Rue Oberkampf who will not be late for anything again. Her hand tightened around the parcel and the paper crackled like dry leaves. The scarf smelled of the lavender that needed to be persuaded. She did not ask which man. The street knows death by the way questions fail. I went to see him, she said, too quickly. You will say it is wrong that a woman goes up. But I kept my coat on. He is correct. What did you bring? Maigret asked, and the question was so simple it seemed a kind of courtesy. The book he asked for, she said, as if books were modest things that did not belong in police sentences. He reads from the lending library where my cousin works. He cannot go because they close when he leaves work. He pays me the deposit sometimes because the man at the desk is sour and won't let me take 2 at once. Yesterday I also asked for a small credit for my mother's tooth. He is kind and he gave it. He is not like other men. He does not stare. Did he give you an umbrella? She blinked. Why would he give me an umbrella? You had one, he said. A good one. Stitched by someone who holds the needle like a pencil. My aunt mended it when the wind took a rib, she said with a flash of pride that improved her face. I bought it second-hand at the market in Barbès last autumn. A gentleman had gone to the country and not returned. People sell umbrellas the way they sell gloves. Yesterday I put it open by the table because it was dripping. I should not have. Madame says you don't do that. I forgot because I was thinking of the tooth. Did you write to him? Maigret said, bringing the 2 threads together with the same tone in which one brings the ends of a shoelace. She looked away, then back, and then down. He does not like knocks at the door when he has his soup. He told me to write because it makes less noise. I wrote that I would come at 6. I wrote that I would bring what I could, and on Thursday the rest. The post brings letters at noon. He likes things to be proper. The rest? I owe him 20 francs since Easter, she said. He said I could pay by 5 and 5. I am not a beggar. It is easier to write when you are ashamed. She said it with a small hard honesty that did not ask for agreement. You left at what time? The wireless made the buzzing, she said, glad of something that sounded like equipment. He could not find a station. I laughed because I am stupid. I left just before past. He said, go now or you will get wet for the 2nd time. He is kind, I went. The concierge was not at her door. I thought she has gone to the cellar for coal. That is all. You saw anyone on the stairs? A man with spectacles who does not like to be touched by air, she said, and the description had in it Durupt's little malice. He kept to the rail and looked at his shoes as if they were enemies. He comes sometimes with a folder. He smells of ink. He went up the last steps when I was in the street. He did not lift his hat. Thursday, Maigret said almost to himself. She nodded, misunderstanding comfortably. Thursday I will put 5 more at the grocer. Tell Madame I say so, or she will think I am all talk. He let her go because she had told him enough, and anything more would be embroidery. Back at the quay he sat with the window open a hand's width, so the river could bring him its damp. He wrote her name where he kept such names, not on paper but on the side of his pipe in memory. Lily, who is a lean to other people, laundry, lavender, purple scarf, blue thread. He wrote another, the man with spectacles who kept to the rail and came when people had soup. He did not write the word accounting because it would arrive on its own when it was ready. He thought of the letter with its apology and its promise for Thursday and of the umbrella that stood like a small black animal in a poor man's room. In the evening he went, back to Rue Oberkampf, not to force a door but to sit with the concierge and the cat. He asked for beer and drank it slowly, so that time would pass at the right speed. The house made the sounds houses make when they are tired, water in pipes, light in stairwells, someone practicing a scale that always falls short of the right note. He told Longyon to put a man on the corner tomorrow, not to pounce but to watch whether shoes turn in without thinking at 6. He asked the concierge to let him sit in the loge again on Thursday, and she agreed with the exaggerated shrug of a woman who uses gesture to push fear away from her breastbone. "You will catch the one who brought the rain inside," she said. Half hope, half reproach. "I will catch the weather," he said, and smiled so she would not worry about the words. When he went back out, the street had settled. A man in spectacles passed the cafe, hugging a folder under his arm against a danger only he could name. He did not look up. Maigret watched him go with the patient interest he gave to people who had not yet decided if they wanted to be seen. Tomorrow was Wednesday, and the next day would be Thursday. He did not hurry the days. He lit his pipe and let it go out. Wednesday had the feel of a day that keeps its hands in its pockets. At the quay, the rooms were warmer than the weather, and the clerks talked in brief phrases the way men talk when they do not want to own an opinion yet. Maigret sorted the few items that had collected like drift along the edges of the case. Lily's small truths, the head clerk's careful ignorance, the precise envelope that had apologized for itself. He did not assemble them. He let them sit near one another until they became accustomed to the company. Afternoon, he walked toward the lending library off Boulevard Voltaire, where the street holds its shoulders up and pretends not to feel the drizzle. Inside, the air smelled of paste and cloth and the faint dust that leaches from paper. The girl at the desk had a red ribbon at her throat, which made her look younger than she wished. She looked up with the readiness of someone who gets blamed for quiet. "My cousin," she said before he had to ask, and then, with a small lowering of the voice that made the word useful instead of sentimental, "Lily, she comes or sends the boy. We keep a ledger because some people think books grow back when you pluck them. Does Armand Larcher borrow through her?" he asked. She ran a finger down the card box with the vanity a girl keeps for good handwriting. "Monsieur Larcher has his own card. He pays his deposit. He brings the books back the day they are due as if returning a borrowed chair. But sometimes, when he has a late hour at the office, he leaves requests with Lily. She is proud of doing things properly, even if she likes purple too much." She handed over 2 cards. The edges had softened with decent use. Titles in a neat librarian's hand. A travel account of Brittany that promised cliffs and quiet inns, a volume of stories by Maupassant, a life of a man who had been important to no one until he died. He took the stories last week. He had asked for something light because the weather sat on him. Yesterday, Lily brought back a book that belonged to someone else entirely, she confided, half scandalized and half amused by the disorder of the world. "We corrected it. She said she would take the one with the bathing huts, because Monsieur liked the sea when he could not travel to it." In the margin of Larcher's card, in a careful older scrawl that was not the girl's, someone had written Thursday settled. It was a librarian's note about a fee, perhaps, but the word peered up with the same thin insistence it had had in the letter. He put the card down. The ribbon at the girl's throat moved with her breath. "Did anyone ask after him?" he said. "A man with spectacles and a folder who did not know what to do with either," she answered promptly. He did not give his name. He looked at the shelves as if they were a warehouse where he could not find the crate he had been sent for. He asked whether Monsieur Larcher kept accounts here, and I told him we keep only the accounts that belong to books. "Thank you," he said, meaning it, and let the door close him back into the damp. At the paper merchants on Rue du Faubourg du Temple, the shelves held their ranks of envelopes like a parade of men trying not to be noticed. The proprietor had the complexion of paper himself, and the suspicion of a man who has seen too many small economies. He admitted to selling stock to the wine importer and to half the offices in the quarter. The watermark was not a signature so much as a rumor. "Everyone uses them," he said, holding a packet the way a priest holds a missal. "If you want secrecy, you buy worse paper and write smaller." "Did a woman buy one packet by itself?" Maigret asked. "Just enough curiosity in the words to make them seem about weather." "They buy 2s and 3s when love is new," the man said, not without kindness. "A woman bought 2 on Monday, and a boy bought one on Friday and forgot his change and came back for it read to his ears. But nothing that wants to be remembered. He shrugged and the shelves did not move. It was an answer of a sort. The letter to Larcher had likely come from the same broad river of stationery that fed the importer's drawers, the library's reminders, the concierge's solicitations. Whoever had written had used what was at hand. There was nothing theatrical in it. Toward evening, when the light went white and then grey and then no colour at all, he walked past the cafe near the importer's office and sat where he could see the door without needing to look at it. He drank a beer that did nothing to his thirst. Men came in with the day on their shoulders and put it down for a while. At 6:30, a figure with the folder under his arm and the spectacles that slid on his nose entered and arranged himself at a table like a man who has to think before he can sit. He ordered a broth and cut the bread into small exact pieces as if measuring his appetite against the coins in his pocket. He had the particular neatness of men who hate stains, because stains argue with their ideas of themselves. He removed a handkerchief from his sleeve and tapped the rims of his spectacles dry of mist. When he opened his folder, the papers inside were already in the order of someone who likes orders. He ate 3 spoonfuls of broth, wrote a figure with the stub of a pencil, ate 3 more and then wiped the spoon and put it aside as if it had misbehaved. Maigret let the minutes settle as the room settled. He lit his pipe and let it go out halfway. When the man had finished and was paying, with coins separated, counted, and placed so that none touched, he rose and moved not toward him but to the bar, where he could be overheard without being addressed. "You work at the importer on Rue du Temple," he said casually to the barman, who had the quiet mouth of a man who knows which customers to help and which to ignore. "The gentleman with the folder is careful with his soup." "Careful with everything," the barman murmured, polishing a glass clean that was already clean enough. "Monsieur Choureau from accounting. On Thursdays he is more careful than on other days." "Why Thursdays?" Maigret asked, a cigarette between his fingers that he did not intend to light. "The books," the barman said. "They bring what is owed and what is not, and he writes it all down so that it looks like truth." Choureau was at the door. He touched only the metal, not the wood, and kept his shoulders turned so the air would not brush him. Outside he turned not toward home, but toward the boulevard, walking with a speed that had nothing to do with distance. Maigret did not follow at once. He watched the chair the man had left, the square of damp on the tabletop where the broth bowl had sat, the bit of bread he had not eaten and had pushed precisely to the plate's edge. Then he paid and stepped into the evening that smelled of wet stone. He caught up 2 corners later, by not catching up at all, simply walking at his own pace until the pace matched. Beside a lamp that made the rain look like silver wire, he came level and said, as if he had only just recalled the name, "Monsieur Choureau." The man flinched in the way of men who live with guilt as a habit and with innocence as an irregular guest. He turned and saw the pipe, the hat, the face he knew from newspapers when newspapers still printed faces. "Monsieur Commissaire," he said, choosing a rank he had heard. "Is there a man in your ledgers?" Maigret answered, unwilling to be precise yet, "who sat down yesterday evening and did not stand up again." "I don't know anything," Choureau said too quickly. Words came in a spill, and then slowed as if they had met an obstacle. "I went to verify a figure. It was raining and my umbrella, one of those things, you know, turned inside out. I dislike getting wet." "You dislike many things," Maigret said without malice. "I was with him a quarter of an hour," Choureau said, as if offering the minimum measure that would not be contradicted. "He signed a confirmation for an advance taken from petty cash last quarter, his, not mine. There was nothing untoward. He drank coffee too strong for the time of day. He complained of the wireless." He breathed a small, precise breath. "When I left, he was alive. Your umbrella?" Maigret said almost idly. "I left it downstairs," Choureau replied, frowning that one should have to account for objects. "I don't open them indoors." "It is, what is the word, unhealthy." "And Thursday?" Maigret asked. He had expected the man to blink in confusion. Instead, a look passed over Choureau's face that was not surprise but irritation at the world for being as it was. "Thursday is when one balances what cannot be balanced any other time. I do my work on Thursdays." He pulled his folder a little closer against his ribs, as if to keep the rain and men like Maigret from making marks on his papers. He half lifted his hat, and then remembered it was not the kind that is lifted. "If there is anything else," he said, not a question but a hope, There will be, Maigret said gently. But not now. He let the man go because pressing him would harden him into something brittle. He stood under the lamp and listened to the rain's small applause on the pavement. He thought of the apology in the slanted hand, and the way a sugar packet had been folded and not used. He thought of a man like Choureau, who would notice dents in ferrules and judge them silently, and of Lily, who would not. At home, Madame had left a plate under a cloth on the stove. He ate standing, then sat, then did not bother to light his pipe. He did not open the umbrella, he said, more to the room than to his wife. Then someone else did, she said, practical as a clean dish, and someone else left it open because she was thinking of her shame or her tooth. Men fuss about floors. Women fuss about other things. Thursday, he said again. The word had the weight of something ordinary and inevitable, like the day itself. In the loge tomorrow, he would sit and let the house show him its breathing. People would come and go, some with errands, some with excuses. If the wrong one came with an umbrella that did not belong to him, perhaps he would not know what to do with his hands. And Maigret would be there, not to pounce, but to notice. Thursday began with the sound of drips from the balcony above their kitchen window, each a small, stubborn insistence. Madame Maigret buttered bread, and watched him the way she watched a sauce, attentive without fuss. He told her he would sit in the concierge's loge that evening. She nodded as if he had said he would be home late from the market. If she left her umbrella open, she said, not looking up from the knife, she did not intend to stay. When a woman settles, she closes it and sets it by the door so it will not be in the way. Open means I am only a minute, or I must show I am coming back. He carried that remark with him as one carries a coin in the pocket, to finger now and then. At the quay he signed papers that did not care whether a man lived or not. Then let the day go on without asking it to hurry. By 5 he was in the Rue again, the collar of his coat turned up against a rain that had decided to be fine but persistent. In the loge the concierge had made room on a chair by moving a sewing basket that had not been used since Lent. The cat accepted him with the indifference cats use to conceal approval. People will pass, she said, for something to say. They always pass more when there is a reason to sit still and notice them. He nodded and did not light his pipe. The house exhaled its warm, tired air. On the stairs a child dragged a wooden horse with a squeak that could be heard between floors. It stopped when a hand, someone's mother's, removed the string. At 5:45, Madame Villon came in to ask whether a letter had arrived from a cousin who was always about to write. She went away again, rearranged by having asked. The watchmaker Durupt passed with a parcel held flat in both hands, like a fragile clock he would not trust to the world. He glanced in and then away, his eye magnified and then small again. The seamstress from above, thumb bandaged from some quarrel with a needle, bent to borrow a newspaper and did not take it when she saw his hat. She would borrow later when the hat belonged to someone else. At 6:05, the street outside altered the way streets do when someone who matters to them turns the corner. Not a hush exactly, but an attention. The purple scarf appeared first, the colour announcing itself before the girl did. Lily paused under the arch where laundry steam makes another weather. She smoothed her skirt with both hands, then wiped the same hands on the skirt as if to cancel the gesture. She had a small paper packet clutched tight, the kind grocers fold with 2 fingers around coins. She saw him through the glass and stood a moment with the look of a person who has rehearsed telling the truth and forgotten the first line. Then she came in because feet know how to end a hesitation when mouths do not. I have 5, she said at once, laying the packet on the edge of the desk as if it might burn. And 2 for Madame at the grocer. Thursday, like I said. I came for— the word caught. For what I left? The umbrella, Maigret said quietly, so the word would not bruise. She nodded, relief and fear crossing her face like 2 birds that do not like each other. He told me to leave something because I am always saying next week, and next week is an egg that never hatches. He said, leave the umbrella and you will come back for it. It will remind you. He was not unkind. Open, Maigret said, feeling the coin in his pocket with 2 fingers. You left it open. It was wet, she said, as if that were a defense in more than one direction, and because if I closed it, I would have had to carry it as if I were already leaving, and I did not want him to think I only came to escape the rain. I meant to sit a moment. Then I thought of the tooth and of the dinner at the laundry, and I stood. He said, go now, or you will be wet again before you reach the passage. He always says go now, like a father would, but not my father. You forgot it, the concierge put in. Unable to keep from being a witness in her own house. I did not forget, Lily said, a small flash of pride that did her credit. I left it. That is not the same. He had it. It made a promise for me. Maigret looked at her hands. They were the hands of a woman who irons for other women. Nail beds bleached by soap, a small burn near the thumb like a crescent moon. The scarf was tied badly. Someone had shown her once, and she had not learned the trick. The lavender reached him and faltered as if ashamed of being noticed. You went out and met the rain, he said. I ran, she said, with a small laugh that did not find itself amusing. At the first corner, a man with spectacles was coming up, and I made myself small so he would not brush me. I always make myself small for men who count. When I reached Passage des Trois Sœurs, I was wet again, but that is what baths are for if you have the sou for hot water. She glanced toward the stairs. I did not come back yesterday because they said the police were there. I am not afraid of the police, only of their questions when I do not know how to answer properly. But Thursday I said I would come, and Thursday it is. He took the little packet and untwisted the paper. The coins lay there looking larger than they would on a table. He did not move them. He did not speak of property rooms or receipts, or the procedure by which umbrellas that have become evidence remain umbrellas for longer than anyone likes. He watched the way her mouth tightened with the effort of not crying in front of a concierge. The umbrella stays for now, he said, and made it sound like something temporary. The way rain is temporary even when it lasts all week. It is not that I think you have done anything you must be punished for. It is that I must treat it like a thing that knows more than it can say. When I no longer need it to be wise, it will be only an umbrella again. She bit her lip and nodded. I will come again, she said, as if setting herself a task she understood, the way one promises to iron collars before supper. Next Thursday I will bring the rest. The word caught in her throat and she swallowed around it. I will bring it to Madame Villon if you say so. She will put it behind the stove and keep count. Tomorrow, Maigret said, surprising himself. Buy yourself a cheap one at the market, even if it is ugly. There will be other Thursdays. She looked at him directly for the first time, as if measuring whether he was the sort of man to say a thing like that and mean it. Something settled in her face. Not gratitude exactly, but the ease of having been seen and found to exist. She lifted her chin toward the stair. May I? Not tonight, he said gently. The room is still a room, but it is not yet a place where one visits. She nodded again and turned. At the door she stopped, and without looking back said, He read the one with the bathing huts last spring and laughed at a page where a boy steals cakes and is sorry only when his stomach hurts. He said, I am that boy. He said the stomach will teach me if shame does not. He was not unkind. Then she went out into the arch and drew her scarf up against the rain, like a woman arranging armor for a small battle. At 20 past, the rhythm of the street altered a second time. The man with the folder and the spectacles came as if the day had placed him there by habit. He kept to the rail even on stairs with no one on them. He touched the loge's doorframe with 2 fingers, not from sentiment but from a superstition he would deny. His hat sent a clear line of water off its brim onto the mat. He frowned at the drop as one frowns at an unbalanced figure. Letters? He asked the concierge, already annoyed at the possibility that there might be. No letters, she said, with the satisfaction of a woman who had learned today not to volunteer more than was asked. He would have passed. But Maigret said his name in the tone menus who have met more than once in rain. Choureau stopped. He did not quite hide the folder under his arm. He simply held it closer, as if folders were children who could take a chill. I am going up, he said, trying to make it sound like the most ordinary of errands, and failing by the margin that separates ordinary men from careful ones. To verify a figure? Maigret asked. To collect a receipt, Choureau said, and regretted the word at once. For petty cash? Maigret asked, mild as water. What does it matter? Choureau's voice sharpened, then softened, ashamed of itself. They will audit. They always audit. Thursday is when I arrange what cannot be explained on other days. He signed. He was precise. I cannot have him. He stopped. It took him a moment to find a shape that was not cruel. He is not here to initial again. The concierge's pencil made a little noise against the edge of the desk, and then was still. Outside, a tram heaved itself along the boulevard with the resignation of old metal. The house seemed to lean toward the loge to listen. Go home, Monsieur Choureau, Maigret said, not unkindly. There will be receipts enough. when there need to be. I will send for you tomorrow. Tonight there is nothing upstairs that wants balancing. Shuro looked past him toward the staircase that went up into his worry. For a moment he hesitated, and Maigret saw in the hesitation a small boy who had been punished once for muddy boots and never quite forgave the rain. Then he inclined his head the width of a ledger line and withdrew, displeased not with the instruction, but with the world for requiring it. When he had gone, the concierge exhaled the way people do when they have been holding their breath for other people's reasons. "That one," she said, meaning not evil but complication. "He has fingers like claws that hold paper and cannot open to bless themselves." Maigret said. The coin in his pocket warmed under his hand. Open meant I am only a minute, or I will come back. A pledge is not an object so much as a path laid between two people. Somewhere on that path, a man with spectacles had tried to arrange numbers so that his world would not tilt, and a girl with a purple scarf had tried to be honest with the only currency she had, shame and a promise. On a chair in a room with a checked oilcloth, a man had sat and tipped gently into death, as if it had been waiting at the right angle all along. He would go up in the morning with the key and let the room be a room again. Tonight he sat in the loge with the cat and listened to the stair. Rain made its thin music along the stone, and somewhere in it there was a note, like a thread pulled through fabric, a sound so small you could not say whether you heard it or remembered. By morning the rain had forgotten its arguments and fell straight, a curtain you could stand behind without being seen. The concierge had left the key on her desk as promised, next to a dish where 2 buttons and a saint's medal slept together without complaint. Maigret took the key and went up. The stair, scrubbed before dawn, still smelled faintly of soda. The room had kept its shape in the night. Rooms do that when they are used to being ordinary. The chair stood the way it had stood. The oilcloth held the small ring where the cup had been, and the match lay like an idea that would not catch. The umbrella was no longer beaded, only dull as if it had spent the night thinking about itself. He set his hat on the bed and did not sit, not yet. He opened the window another finger's width and let the street draw a careful breath. Dr. Renier came up short of his own impatience, with a clean collar and the air of someone who disliked uncertainty more than rain. He glanced at the room once, and then at the invisible map he carried in his head. "Between 6 and 7, he said, answering the question before it was asked. "More toward the middle than the ends. The heart simply refused to be useful. Coffee does not help a heart that has been grumbling for years, nor does annoyance if there was any." He did not struggle. I have seen struggle. This is not that. A man tips, that is all. Maigret said. He looked at the hands open on the memory of the chair. "No marks." "No marks," the doctor agreed, pleased at a case that would not require him to pronounce on poison or the intent of men. He signed what he had to sign and left, making sure his shoes did not bring the damp along with them. Maigret closed the window by the amount he had opened it, then went to the wardrobe. He did not rummage. He shifted things in the way a man shifts a pile when he intends to put it back as it was. On the wardrobe's top shelf, behind the rolled tie on its cardboard tube, a small envelope that had no address lay with 3 pencil strokes on it. He tipped it into his palm. Inside, a slip from a grocer's receipt book, the kind with numbers that climb without thinking. The handwriting was Larcher's, a lean 20 rest Thursday. Under it, 3 small ticks like birds in flight. He slid the paper back and returned the roll of tie, the way one restores a game that was being played alone. The concierge appeared in the doorway without crossing it, her hands damp from a cloth she had wrung too many times. She stood as if the threshold were a church step. The black cat, who believed no such thing, threaded between her ankles and came to inspect Maigret's trouser cuff. "I should dust," she said, asking permission from the room rather than from him. "In a moment," he said. "Sit." She did, because he had the voice of someone who could make a chair be there, even if no chair were in the room. She looked at her damp hands, then folded them into the apron as if they belonged to someone else. When she spoke, her voice had lost its sharp corners. "I opened the letter," she said, getting it out the way you remove a splinter, the one on his pigeonhole. "I have done it before, not to be cruel. People forget to tell me things, and letters tell me for them. A kettle lifts a flap if the steam is patient. I reseal with my tongue. I know the shape of glue. I know it is wrong. I will say the rosary for it, but I would have done it again. He nodded, not absolving, not condemning. "What did you look for?" "Rent," she said simply. "Men promise in ink and forget in coin. I do not like to knock at their doors in front of their shoes." She took in a breath and let it out. "I saw the hand was a woman's. I saw the word Thursday. I thought, he will have the money on Thursday and I will not have to say the word. It is a comfort when a paper says what a mouth needn't." "Did you see anyone after the man with spectacles left?" he asked. "I heard him go down on the outside of the steps as if afraid of catching something from the wood," she said, almost with affection for such fastidiousness. I sat and wrote a name on my list that I had written already. At 7, perhaps Madame Vion's child cried and then stopped. Men came, and then there was the doctor's bag on the mat, and I went to the cellar. Because a woman's feet do not belong near a man who has died, unless she must be his widow. He stood near the table and let silence sit between them until it found its place. "He lent small money," he said at last, not a question. She nodded. "Not to the ones who drink it, to the ones who are ashamed of asking. He did it as if he were paying for his own supper, not as if he were buying anyone's soul. That is why I open letters, monsieur. It is easier to ask for rent from a man who has given than from a man who has only taken." When she had gone, he poured water from the jug into the basin and dipped a finger. He touched the ring on the oilcloth and it broke and rejoined itself. In the ashtray, the 3 stubs lay like short sentences. He put his thumb to the match, then left it there. From within the umbrella's canopy, there was still something faintly sweet that was not the room. He leaned and breathed it in, and felt again the idea of a basin used by someone impatient, soap not rinsed all the way. At the importer's office, the head clerk received him with the proper combination of respect for authority and resentment that work must be interrupted. In the small cage that had been Larcher's, there was the same order as before, the same clean patch where a cup had rested, the same blotter with its little wounds. Behind the ledger a slip had been pinned, and the pin had left rust freckles on the paper. It was a receipt, neat, the amount clear, the date yesterday's, and the signature written with a different hand than the rest of the ledger. Larcher's name was there, but the loop of the L was too careful, the way men draw a shape they have practiced recently, not the way they write their own. "Who pinned this?" Maigret asked. The head clerk looked as if asked to pronounce on a family argument. "Monsieur Choureau brings the petty cash into order on Thursdays," he said. "He leaves confirmations. If we had to wait for men to sign only during office hours, we would wait until Saint-Glinglin. Those who live near sign at home. There is nothing improper in this. It is the neighborhood way." "And this hand?" Maigret said, tapping the loop. The man studied the paper with the seriousness of someone inspecting an insect. "It is the dead man's name and yet not his," he admitted, which was all the precision he could stomach. "I will not say more. It is not for me to accuse a colleague of exactitude." On the way out, the barman saw him pass the cafe window and lifted his chin by a degree that meant, "He came yesterday. He will come again." Maigret did not stop. He went back to the quay and sent a note that would not frighten, to ask Monsieur Choureau to present himself at 4. A second note went to Passage des Trois Sœurs, in care of the cousin at the library, to say that if Mademoiselle Aline would like to retrieve what she had left, she could come to the quay at 3:30. The phrasing mattered. People come more willingly to claim what is theirs than to answer for what is not. There were hours between, and he let them be hours. He ate something without remembering the taste, and walked along the river with his hands in his pockets, so his fingers would have company. He thought of the receipt with its too careful loop, and of the way a neat man could be careless when he needed the world to be the shape he preferred. He thought of the 3 stubs in the ashtray, and a coffee poured too strong, and a man who did not struggle because the heart has its own reasons for stopping. At 3:30, Lily came, hair damp under the scarf, as if she had washed before courage. She stood in the outer office with both hands on her handbag, as if to keep it from falling open, and letting out whatever poor things it contained. "You asked me," she said, her voice low because walls at the quay are used to voices. "If it is still evidence, I will leave it. But I would like to see it once." "You shall," he said. "It will be a moment. Do you remember what you wrote?" She flushed the color of someone who is proud that she can write and ashamed that it shows. "I wrote that I would come at 6 and bring what I could, and Thursday the rest. I wrote do not be cross, because when I write to men they are cross, if I do not apologize first. He was not one of those, but the hand wrote by itself." She looked at him then with a sudden unguarded hope that made her younger. He did not die because I tired him with my shame, she asked. No, Maigret said, because he had been a policeman long enough to know when a no was also a blessing. He died because men die. The hour was badly chosen for all of you, that is all. She nodded and pressed her mouth together to keep it from making a shape she would regret. He asked her to sit, and she did with the care of a person who does not trust chairs not to give way. At 4, Choureau arrived with the folder like a shield and the spectacles sliding as usual. He saw the girl by the door and stiffened, because he disliked the proximity of lives he did not count. Maigret took him into a small room where the walls were the same grey as the river in bad weather. Yesterday you obtained a receipt, he said. Today you will tell me whether the hand that made the L is the hand I think, or the hand that needed it to be. Choureau blinked. The folder shifted a fraction. He opened his mouth to say the sentence careful men always say first, "There is nothing to tell," and then closed it again because something in the quiet of the room did not agree with lies. His lips made the shape of a protest, and then another, smaller one. "I dislike disorder," he said finally, with the fatigue of someone who has been holding out a long time against furniture being moved. "I dislike it so much that sometimes I correct it when the world refuses." I took a confirmation he would have given if he had been in the office. He owed it. He would not have refused. He lifted his eyes and let them fall again. "I did not harm him." Maigret did not move. "No," he said. "You harmed yourself, perhaps." "And the paper," Choureau's mouth twitched. Something fragile in him, stretched taut over years of small anxieties, made a tiny sound. Not quite a break. A beginning. He put the folder on his knees and held it there as if holding a sleeping child. "Will I—" he began, and could not find the word he needed that was neither prison nor dismissal nor shame at the café. "You will go home," Maigret said, "because now was not the hour for judgment. And tomorrow you will come back and sign your own name for the thing you have done." When the door closed on him, the room felt larger. Outside, Lily sat with her hands still on the bag. She looked up quickly, ready to absorb any blow and turn it into work. Maigret stood a moment with his pipe unlit and the rain pulling at the windows. He saw in the same moment a girl with a purple scarf and a man with a folder, each held upright by the small economies of their days, both circling a dead man who had lent coins as if lending were a way to keep himself from falling out of the world. The umbrella would be an umbrella again soon. Before that, there would be one more visit to a poor room and a last small thing to set right so that the house could arrange its breathing. He let her wait until the echo of Choureau's shoes had gone down the corridor. Only then did he step back into the outer office, the girl still sitting as if her body were holding itself small against an invisible wall. Her scarf had slipped, showing the damp at her temples. She smoothed the handbag once, twice, then looked up with that same unguarded hope as the day before. "You spoke to him?" she asked, careful not to use a name. "Yes. Did he—" She hesitated, the question caught between shame and curiosity. "He wrote what another man's hand should not have written," Maigret said, almost gently. "That is all." Nothing more. She seemed to weigh the answer, then nodded, accepting it as enough truth for her. He told her she could go, that the umbrella would wait until he said otherwise. She rose, straightened her skirt, and walked to the door without asking again. Only as she put her hand on the knob did she turn back. "He was kind," she said quickly, as if she had to leave the word behind in the room before it spoiled. "He gave me coins like they were mine already. I didn't want the umbrella to mean I owed him too much. I wanted it to mean I'd come back. That's all." Then she was gone, footsteps fading, the smell of her lavender lingering like a note in the wrong key. The office settled. Maigret sat with the envelope in his pocket, and the memory of the small scrap in the wardrobe, Aline, 20, rest Thursday. He tapped the bowl of his pipe against his palm. The girl's honesty, crude and threadbare as her scarf, had fitted neatly with the scrap. She had owed him 20 francs. She had returned 5, left the umbrella to promise the rest. She had not expected to find him slumped in his chair. Life spilled out like coffee from a cup left too long, but the umbrella had stayed, and in staying had gathered suspicion like dust. That evening he walked back to Rue Oberkampf. The house met him with its usual silence, which was never complete. A baby turning in sleep, water running somewhere, a cough smothered in cloth. In the loge the concierge looked at him as if she had been expecting him all along. "Your chair," she said, nodding toward the corner. He sat. The cat leapt onto his knee without permission and pressed its weight there as if to remind him he had no other duties. Through the glass of the loge window, he watched the stairwell dim with the last of the light. He was not waiting for anyone in particular. Waiting was his way of watching the shape of things when they stopped pretending to be orderly. At 7:30, Durup, the watchmaker, passed, carrying a parcel under his coat, though the rain had ceased. He inclined his head to Maigret, a little wary of the eyes that always seemed to see too much. On the second floor, Madame Villon called her child to bed, in a voice meant to be stern and softened by love. In the attic, Mademoiselle Berthe laughed too loudly at nothing. It was a house alive, though one room would remain lifeless. At 8, Longnon arrived, shoulders hunched, coat still dripping. He ducked into the loge with his usual sigh. "They've nothing more to say," he muttered. Every one of them repeating themselves like barrel organs. The girl, the one with the scarf, she's frightened enough to confess to thefts she hasn't made. And Churreau, he broke off with disgust. Paper, paper, paper. If he could live on receipts, he'd never eat soup again. Maigret listened, not correcting, not agreeing. The cat purred, filling the silence. "What do you think, Chief?" Longnon pressed, impatient with calm. "That a man died because his heart stopped," Maigret said. "But the heart stopped in a room where other things were left unfinished. Small things. Coins, receipts, shame, kindness. And umbrellas." Longnon gave a short laugh, but without joy. "So we make a case of a weather thing?" "We make a case of the people who touched it," Maigret said. They left it at that. Later, when the street was almost deserted, Maigret climbed the stairs once more and opened the door with the key. He stood in the still room, hat in hand, as if visiting a patient. The umbrella was there, mute and ordinary now. He closed it slowly, each rib folding in with a soft sigh. It became a stick of wood and cloth again, the magic gone. He leaned it against the wardrobe, where a man might have left it before hanging up his hat. In the drawer he found the photograph of the woman cut from a larger print. He looked at it longer this time. The smile that was not a smile. The eyes turned slightly away from the lens. Perhaps a sister, perhaps no relation at all. He put it back carefully. When he came down, the concierge watched his face for a verdict. "Tomorrow," he said simply. "Tomorrow we will let them bury him." She nodded, crossing herself. The cat yawned. The next day at the little cemetery near Père Lachaise, the handful of mourners looked more like people waiting for a bus. 2 clerks from the office, the seamstress with black thread around her finger, Lily at the back with her scarf knotted too tight, and Churreau, folder under his arm even here. Rain fell gently as if it had dressed for the occasion. Maigret stood aside. He did not need to be close. He watched the faces, the embarrassment of men who had worked beside someone and never known him, the stiff sorrow of women who could not afford to cry for long, the raw shame in the girl who thought her umbrella had condemned him. He put the paper into his wallet and the umbrella under his arm and went down. Passage des Trois Sœurs received him with steam and the tapping of irons. Lily was at the table with a pile of shirts that had already learned not to hope for better than they had. She looked up, saw the umbrella, and pressed her hand to her mouth in a way that no theatrical woman would have dared. "I came yesterday," she said uselessly. "You were not there. I was somewhere else," he said. "It amounts to the same." He set the umbrella on the table. It looked out of place, too well behaved among the damp things. Her fingers went to the strap and then stopped, afraid of claiming something that did not quite belong to her and yet did. He took the scrap from his wallet and put it beside the umbrella. Afterward, when they drifted away, he lit his pipe and let it go out. Longnon muttered about wasted time, but Maigret stayed a little longer, watching the ground close over a man who had lent coins without cruelty and kept ledgers without deception. He thought of the umbrella, of the blue thread stitched by an aunt in a kitchen, of the apology written in a hand that pressed too hard, of the careful loop of a forged L. None of it added to guilt, yet all of it told a story. Back at the quay, he wrote the report. Natural death, no foul play. He did not mention lavender or umbrellas, or a girl with shame like a second skin, or an accountant who feared disorder more than lies. Those belonged not in reports but in the quiet rooms of memory. When he returned home that night, Madame Maigret had soup waiting. He ate, set down his spoon, and said only, "It was the umbrella that made them speak. Without it they would have stayed silent." She nodded as if she had known from the beginning. "People need something to look at when they tell the truth," she said. Later in the dark, he thought again of the room on Rue Oberkampf. It would return to being ordinary. The oilcloth, the wardrobe, the window that let in the smell of wet stone. But in his mind, it would always hold the shadow of an umbrella, opened where no umbrella should be, making a silence heavy enough to draw out everything people tried to hide. The day after the burial, Paris behaved as if nothing had happened, which is what cities do best. At the quay, paper moved across desks. Men signed where they were told. The river kept its brown counsel. Maigret let the morning spend itself, and then walked toward Boulevard Voltaire with no urgency, as if he had all the time in the world to arrive at the smallest thing. The lending library was warmer than the street. The girl with the red ribbon looked up and then down, already framing an apology for something she had not done. He set his hat on the counter and turned Larcher's card with a finger. "This hand," he said, touching the penciled note in the margin, "Thursday, settled." "It isn't yours." "No," she admitted, relieved to know precisely which guilt she was being offered. "Madame Gervais writes in the margins when there is an arrangement. She says cards must remember as well as people." Madame Gervais was summoned from the back, a fine-boned woman whose hair had given up being brown with dignity. She wore a cardigan too thin for the season, and glasses she did not need in order to see him perfectly. She took the card the way a priest takes a missal, read the note and nodded. On Thursdays, she said, Monsieur Larcher would come after his work if the weather did not bully him. He would say, "What do I owe and what do I not owe that someone else cannot?" We do not encourage such things, you understand. Accounts here are meant to teach punctuality, but the world is full of people who are punctual with their shame and late with their coins. He chose one or two and put a mark. He paid for a sailor's book for a boy whose father looked through the glass and pretended not to see. He settled Madame Villon's fine when her child was ill, and she had to keep a book 3 days. He did not want gratitude. He wanted quiet. She tapped the pencil note. "This is my hand." He stood there, and I drew the line because he had left the coins and said, "Thursday, then. Put settled and we will reconcile later." He liked the word. It made it sound as though accounts could be persuaded to be at peace. "Yesterday's Thursday did not finish," Maigret said. Madame Gervais's mouth made a small shape of regret and acceptance. "No," she said. "Not for him. We will forgive the small sum and keep the word. It is the least one can do for a man who liked quiet." Outside, the rain had thinned to a sort of suspended mist. At the grocer's, the bell made its honest sound. Madame behind the counter gave him the look of a woman who has taught herself not to be surprised by policemen, and therefore is never startled by anything else. "He left coins," she said, before he had asked, "because some confessions want to be rid of themselves. Not always for Lily, sometimes for the boy's boots in winter. Sometimes for the old one on the corner who eats soup with nothing in it when the prices climb. He would say, 'Put it down to my account.' And when I asked what account, he would smile like a man who has counted his loneliness and found a use for it." She took out her book and turned to a page where columns marched like obedient soldiers. "Arline 20 rest Thursday," she read, and he heard the handwriting in her voice. "He told me not to worry if she brought 5 and a promise. A promise weighs more than an extra coin," he said. He said. She closed the book with a kind of finality that belonged more to her than to paper. "If you come to say the 20 is gone into the ground, then I will say the ground can have the number, and the girl can have the soup. It is settled." There was no ceremony to be made of it, so he made none. He walked on, smoking a pipe he did not quite light, and cut across to Rue du Temple, to the importer's office, where figures tried to keep the weather out by becoming neat. The head clerk had the same stiff collar, and the same impression of being a man whom collars had governed all his life. "Your man came yesterday," he said before Maigret asked. "Choureau. He looked like a chair someone has sat on too long." He signed a note that explained what needed explaining. "The director will make a face and then put the paper where faces cannot follow. We dislike disorder," he added, as if making an offering from a faith he still believed in. "He will keep his place," Maigret said, not asking a question. The clerk considered fairness and decided he could afford it. "He will keep a smaller corner of it," he said dryly, "which is perhaps what he should have had from the beginning. It is not always wrong when the world adjusts a man to the size of his own conscience." On the way out, he felt himself slowing, as if his feet had learned the tempo of small, necessary errands and were unwilling to rush the last one. At Rue Oberkampf, the concierge had propped the loge door with a ledger so that the cat could come and go without making a speech about it. "It is ready," she said, meaning the room, meaning the umbrella. "I dusted around your thinking." I did not move it. He climbed once more to the third floor. The room had gone back to ordinary, as rooms do when they are allowed. He took the umbrella from where he had leaned it and slipped the strap around the cloth. The blue stitches along one rib held. They were stronger than they looked. Kitchen work is like that. He turned it in his hand and saw under the strap the corner of a folded scrap, almost nothing. He eased it free. It was an old bit from the same grocer's book, Larcher's hand in pencil, a lean 5 OK. Rest Thursday. Underneath, not yet written and yet, already beginning the curve of an S. He stood a moment with the scrap in his palm, listening to the house make its small breaths. "He wrote this," he said. He wrote it in his room, a little clumsily, as if the pencil did not want to say what his head had already decided. He had the habit of writing "settled" on Thursdays. He did not have time to finish the word yesterday, but he had started it. "That is enough for me." She read the lines as if they were in a language she had learned as a child and not used since. The red came up in her face and then drained, leaving her looking both older and in some small place under the scarf, very young. She touched the 5 with the tip of one finger, as if to confirm that the coin she had scraped together could be a word on paper. "It is forgiven, then?" she asked carefully, as if saying it any other way might break it. "It was already forgiven," he said. "He had decided before you decided to deserve it." He was that sort. She bent her head not to cry but to think where to put this new fact among the others that governed her day: prices, bosses, sore feet, a mother's tooth. When she looked up, her eyes were clear. "I will pay the rest to Madame anyway," she said, stubborn in the honest way of people who have been patronized and have grown strong against it. "Not because I must, but because I don't like being the girl who doesn't finish things. If he liked settled, I will like it too." "You will do as you like," he said, which was permission of a kind and also a compliment. He turned to go, then paused. "Keep the umbrella closed," he added with the ghost of a smile. It has said enough. On Rue Oberkampf, the evening was beginning again as evenings do, with doors shutting and pots rattling and someone cursing the draught. In the loge, the concierge sat with her rosary, lips not moving but fingers counting. He put the scrap on her desk beside the saint's medal. "For your list," he said. She read it, nodded once, and tucked it into the ledger where she kept her other small absolutions. "I will write settled," she said, in the same tone she might have used to say Amen. Later at home, Madame Maigret ladled stew and watched the way he unfolded his napkin. "You look as if you have been forgiven for something," she observed. "Not me," he said. "Someone no one will remember properly." She set the pot down and sat. They ate in the quiet of people who do not need to make noise to feel alive. Afterward, he lit his pipe and let it go out. The habit pleased him. He thought of a small room that had kept its shape, of a girl with a purple scarf who would learn to close umbrellas indoors, of a clerk who would sign his own name a little more carefully for a while, of a librarian who believed that cards should remember. In his report, there was nothing about any of it. It said only what the files can carry without bending: natural death, no suspicion of foul play. The rest would live where such things live, in the air of a stairwell scrubbed with soda, in the pages of a library card, in a grocer's ledger, in the smell of rain that sometimes lingers in a room after the window has been closed. He sat a long time with the pipe unlit, listening to the rain begin again, each drop spelling a small word on the city, and he felt not satisfaction exactly, but the calm that comes when a thing has found its right name. The weeks that followed did what weeks always do. They folded the past into a drawer until only those who had touched it remembered where it lay. The importer's office went on tallying shipments, the grocer filled bags with potatoes and cabbage, and the library lent out its volumes of travel and Maupassant. Aileen, Lily to those who needed her smaller, went back to the laundry steam, purple scarf tucked too tight, the lavender still clinging faintly, though no one believed it anymore. Choureau returned to his ledgers, shoulders tighter, signatures a fraction less confident, a man chastened not by prison but by the awareness of his own hands. Rue Oberkampf kept its ordinary noises. A child dragged a toy on the stairs. Madame Villon scolded. The watchmaker listened for ticks in clocks that mirrored his own. Only the third-floor room remained quiet, scrubbed, its window shut against the rain. Another tenant would take it in time. Houses do not stay empty long, but for now the oilcloth, the wardrobe, and the chair seemed to hold a memory of someone who had sat still long enough to let the heart decide it had finished. Maigret went once more, not because duty required it, but because habit carried him. He stood with his hat in his hand and looked at the place where the umbrella had been, the circle of oilcloth where a cup had cooled. Nothing about it announced mystery now. A poor man's room, with furniture that expected no compliments, yet in its quiet way it had made people speak. A girl about her shame, an accountant about his fear of disorder, a concierge about her trespass with steam and glue. An umbrella had stood open in the wrong place, and because of that, truths had been left in the air that would otherwise have stayed folded inside. He closed the door, gave the key back to the concierge, and told her the file would say only natural death. She nodded, already knowing, her fingers slipping the new scrap of paper with settled into her ledger, as though the house itself needed the word to be written down. That evening at home, Madame Maigret served him stew, and asked nothing more than whether it had rained. He said it had, though less than yesterday, and she smiled as if she had known. Later, as he sat with his pipe unlit, he thought of the girl, of the accountant, of the poor man who lent without cruelty. No one would make speeches for him. His name would not be printed except on a slip of municipal paper. Yet in small ways, through blue stitches and coins folded in paper, through embarrassed confessions and quiet promises, he had pulled the truth of others into the light. Outside, rain began again, steady, unhurried. It tapped at the window as if reminding him that the city was never silent, only waiting to be listened to. He drew in the faint scent of tobacco from the bowl of his pipe and let it go unlit, a gesture of peace. The case was over, not because of evidence or triumph, but because the world had settled itself quietly in its own time. And that, he thought, was enough. He thought was enough.